Hello and welcome. My name is Josam Oy. We are going to report about critical theorizing. Throughout our sociological theories course, we have put an emphasis on the foundational theories like structural functionalism that also led to critical theorizing. We have extended it to micro-level foundational theories like symbolic interactionism, dramaturgy, social exchange, among others. Now, we're going to trace the dots backwards and check how we can apply critical theorizing to modernity and postmodernity. Perhaps the basic reason for that is that sociology was born during the early modernization, especially since we needed to make sense of the drastic changes like industrialization, democratization, urbanization, and more. We also need to contextualize that these things were products of enlightenment. And what I mean by that is Renaissance and the age of science that highlighted the purpose of progress, which they deemed during that time, or maybe until now, a sign of progress that would make the world a better place. We still see sociologists of today carrying this purpose, weighing the gravity of changes and trying to propose solutions on how to move forward. But of course, as sociologists, we need not take anything for granted, and the best illustration of that is how Karl Marx formulated a critical theory in diagnosing modernity. Needless to say, he saw it as harmful. Weber, one of the also canonized figures in sociology, as highlighted in Nicole Curato's article, focused more on what Jonathan Turner refers to as the passionless world of rational legal domination, which results to people being trapped or iron caged, brought about by the bureaucratization of many things. Emil Durkheim, functionalist as he may be, also saw this but pointed out the lack of social integration in society as the problem. And we learned that this was brought about by increasing differentiation that was also caused by increasing population. Some take a more sympathetic view on challenges or on changes. George Simmel and Herbert Spencer actually deem it as emancipatory rather than oppressive because most of the time, memberships in a modernized society become voluntary rather than coerced. Now, one of the core problems of early critical theory is how we can understand social reality and the projects that we must further cognizant of our interpretation of society. Two leading perspectives, as you can see on the slide, were centered during this point. We all know that the Marxist critical theory argue that endogenous factors and the increasing technical capacities of humans would likewise push them to create a better world. They call this a combination of theory and practice. Sa Filipino, indignant groups most likely would allure to the sentiment na hungkag ang lahat ng teorya kung hindi naman naisa sa praktika. Marx argued, therefore, that societies are evolving through predictable epochs based on the relationships of the base and the superstructure. We have known this in the base superstructure theory, which are encapsulated in what he refers to as the mode of production. He predicts that societies are going toward communism where inequalities will be eliminated. The trigger for this is simply the system that we have right now, capitalism. As critical theories expose the horrors of capitalism, Marx himself declared that the revolutionary movement would topple capitalism. We know that this hasn't happened yet, which is the reason why we have theories to interpret this. Max Weber was the contender of Marx in emphasizing the effects of capitalism in general. He said that the system did not really create conditions that would lead to a revolutionary movement towards emancipation or a mode of production leaning on capitalism, but actually, he said that modernization caused rationalization. What we mean by that is rational legal domination throughout the law and bureaucratic models were penetrated almost every aspect of our social life. Such that if we're going to look at how capitalism changed society, you are bestowed more freedom because you don't have feudal lords that control you or religious ties that crucify you should you not engage or adhere to their systems. You are free from old traditions, yet it is replaced by laws that bound you to follow, markets that compel you to survive economically, Playing with the system, for example, in education, that while it assumes freedom, bounds you still to a dominant grading system that you still adhere to even if you said that you're free. You don't feel controlled by dogma anymore, indeed, because they have rationalized rules, deadlines, and systems enough for you to take it granted and feel like it's okay. So that's what Max Baver argued. And what solidified this pessimistic view is the phenomena happening in the mid 1930s. The Russian Revolution, for example, instead of bringing about emancipation, led to Stalinism. In the West, for example, we had Germany's Hitler and Italy's Benito Mussolini, that instead of workers revolting for emancipation or for a realization of their rights, what happened is that they were willing to sell their alienated labor. The pattern, instead of Marxist capitalism to alienation or the exploitation of labor that would compel a revolution towards a mode of production that is communism, what happened was leaning more on Max Weber's capitalism, causing rationalization or means and rationality that would enable control to oppress you continuously. So these are things that we ponder until today, but I think the next reporters would explain it better.
Now I am going to discuss the rise of the Frankfurt School and the key thinkers behind it. The first generation of the critical theorists that tried to interpret Marx's emancipatory dream and Weber's reality of oppression are called the Frankfurt School. And it has three members: George Lukács, Max Horkheimer, and Theodor Adorno. First, we have George Lukács, the primary link in the transition from Marx and Weber to modern critical theory. First, we have yung reification. Hiniram niya yung concept ni Marx ng fetishism of commodities na nagde-define sa social relationships as objects na kayang i-manipulate and bilhin sa mga market. Then, rationalization naman ng concept ni Weber, nire-interpret nito into something na people see one another as things. However, may limit lang kung gaano kadaming reification and rationalization yung kayang i-endure ng isang tao. Then, subjectivism, kasi nag-fail si Marx and si Weber na i-analyze yung intersubjectivity or yung mga ways na nag-i-interact yung mga tao through shared consciousness. And pinropose niya ni Lukács na critical theory's role is to expose the reification through analyzing historical processes that dehumanizes people. And sabi niya, ang solution lang dito is to let people be aware of their situation. Kasi kung hindi nila alam na namamanipulate na pala sila or yung sitwasyon nila na kinakaharap ngayon ay hindi na pala tama, hindi mag-end yung cycle ng oppression and yung manipulation. Next, we have Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno that argues subjective consciousness and material reality cannot be separated. Kasi 'di ba, how people think and how people act are heavily influenced din naman ng environment na kinabibilangan niya. And ang tao naman ay agent ng society to maintain the organization and peace within the society. However, human subjective side is restricted by the spread of rationalization. Kasi nagkakaroon na ng iba't ibang factor kung paano nagdedesisyon and kung paano nag-iisip yung individual. Na-define ni Horkheimer and ni Adorno ang critical theory into something na dapat mag-expose ng dualism between the subjective world and the realm of reality. Kumbaga, kailangan yung critical theory daw ipakita kung ano talaga yung nangyayari sa totoong buhay. One example siguro nito yung false consciousness ni Marx, na akala ng mga workers ay malaya nilang nagagawa yung gusto nila, ganyan. Pero in reality, may nagko-control pa rin sa kanila. Then, interdisciplinary praxis naman. Ano ba muna yung praxis? Praxis is the application or connecting theory into real-life situation. Ngayon, di ba, interdisciplinary siya kasi consciousness, psychology. And ang focus naman nito ay parang capitalism, ganyan-ganyan. So, economy, or economics. Then, philosophy always naman, and society. Kasi kung paano nag-interact yung dynamics ng society during that time. And sinasabi ni Horkheimer na dapat ang critical theory ay guided ng particular practical interest para mapalaya yung people from oppression and domination. Then, we have negative dialectics na dinevelop ni Adorno. Si Adorno ay very pessimistic sa critical theory bringing major changes in the society. Ganyan. So, ang negative dialectics naman ay nag-focus sa continuous criticism of ideas, conceptions, and conditions. Though, syempre, hindi naman enough yung criticisms na yon na magbigay ng change within the society. Pero, nakakatulong yon para i-allow yung tao na malaman yung mga struggles, ganyan. Kasi continuously criticizing the ideologies and the conditions, nagiging aware din yung mga tao sa kung ano yung mga oppressive conditions na kinakaharap na pala nila. Now we have Gramsci's theory of ideological hegemony. Si Antonio Gramsci ay hindi part ng Frankfurt School. Pero yung mga ideas niya ay related sa kung ano yung pinag-aaralan ng Frankfurt School. Ngayon tinanong niya kung bakit hindi nag-end ang capitalism kahit na merong prediction ni Marx na magkakaroon ng revolusyon. Sinagot niya naman. Na-observe niya daw kasi na nung mid-20th century ay nag-adapt na yung mga tao. Tinanggap na lang nila kung ano yung sistema na meron sila. Kasi na-realize niya na hindi lang naman pala economy ang may kakayanang mag-control sa tao, kundi pati na rin yung culture at yung ideologies. Ngayon, sinabi niya na ang ruling class ay hegemon. Kasi sila yung may power. Hindi lang in terms ng production, ganyan. Pero kaya din nilang i-control kung ano yung mga ideologies na lumalabas sa society. So, sabihin nila na pag nagtrabaho kayo ganyan, hardworking kayo, magiging successful na kayo. Pero at the same time, hindi mo naman masasabi na totoo yung ganon. Kasi kahit naman gano'n ka-hardworking na tao, kung hindi naman enough yung ibabayad sa'yo, hindi ka pa rin magiging successful or something like that. Nasa-shape nun yung mga ganyang ideologies kung paano nag-isip yung tao. Kaya, naging adaptive na lang sila. Tinanggap na lang nila kung ano yung sistema or yung sitwasyon na meron sila ngayon. Ngayon, yung role ng state ay parang sila yung nagko-control. Pero hindi halata na kinokontrol ka nila. Kasi gagawin nila, mag-i-educate, paparaanin nila yung mga ideologies na yon through schools, different institution. Kasi syempre kung ikaw man, iisipin mo ba na kinokontrol ka na kung pinag-aaral ka naman. Pero education is one way to control human mind. Not literally. Yan. Kaya ginamit nila yon yung state na mag-control ng tao in a not offensive way. Kasi mo naman nga iisipin na nakokontrol ka na kung pinag-aaral ka. Then, culture and ideology. Sabi ni Albert Bergeson, culture and ideology is no longer the thing to be explained, but the thing that makes the explaining. Ang goal ng theory na to ni Gramsci ay to expose the ideologies and the oppression na ginagawa ng ruling class sa mga tao. And para malaman nila ng mga tao kung ano yung sitwasyon nila ngayon. Like, para maging aware sila na namamanipulate na pala sila. And lastly, we have Althusser's structuralism. Louis Althusser was a scholar influenced by structuralism. Pinag-aaralan niya yung mga hidden structures or hidden system na humuhubog sa kung paano nag-work yung society. Isa sa mga contribution niya ay yung ideological state apparatus na nagpapakita kung ano yung mga ideologies na ginagamit ng state para ma-maintain yung control sa society. Ganun na sabi ko kanina, yung sa education, yung mga different institution na ginagamit ng state para i-control yung society in a very subtle way. Indirect, kumbaga. Kasi kung ano yung bumababang ideologies sa mga institution na yun, ay yung kung ano din yung nakakarating sa bawat individual. Kaya, yun din yung humuhubog sa kung paano mag-isip yung mga tao. Yan sabi niya, merong iba't ibang structures sa society. Isa na din economic, political, pati na rin yung culture at ideological system. Sabi niya na kahit na nagdo-dominate yung economic structure ay hindi naman maitatanggi na yung iba't ibang structure ay yung iba pang structure ay merong own way and their own logic kung paano nagpa-function and kung paano nila nai-impluwensyahan yung society. Ngayon sabi niya din, history ay hindi lang hinuhubog ng iisang tao. Sinasabi niya na ang history ay nagbabago. Depende sa kung ano yung nangyayari sa mga hidden structures ng society. Na nagkakaroon ng social change if merong pagbabago dun sa mga structure na yon, sa mga hidden structure, and if hindi na sila nag-work together. Siyempre, pagka may hindi na gumaganang system, magkakaroon ng pagbabago. Then, lastly, people are trapped in logic. Kasi, di ba, sobrang powerful ng ideology na kaya niyang i-control or i-shape kung paano mag-isip ang isang tao and kung paano niya naiintindihan yung reality. People might think, siguro example yung kanina na people might think na sila yung gumagawa ng choices na yun in their own free will. Pero hindi nila nare-realize na yung ideologies na binaba ng or pinakalat ng mga institution ay nakakaapekto kung paano sila nagdedesisyon. Kaya somehow natatrap ng ideology kung paano mag-isip or kung paano mag-isip ang isang tao. Kaya nahihirapan silang questionin or i-challenge yung system. Kaya instead na i-challenge nila yon, tinanggap na lang nila and nag-conform sila sa kung ano yung nangyayari.
So good day everyone. Now let's tackle about the transformation of Karl Marx project. So first, ano nga ba ang emancipatory project ni Karl Marx? Ito ay tumutukoy sa may goal niya na i-free ang society from inequalities at exploitation ng capitalism. So ito ay makikita sa Communist Manifesto ni Karl Marx at Engels. So ano nga ba yung Communist Manifesto? Ito ay nagsisilbing call to revolution na nakafocus sa real world conditions, class struggles at social change. Ang idea dito is para kay Karl Marx, ang theory raw ay dapat mag-lead to actual revolution. So next is kaya naman si German ideology criticized ni Marx ang mga Young Hegelian. So kahit na nakikita ng mga Young Hegelian na revolutionary sila, hindi sila kinoconsider ni Marx at Engels na ganon, na revolutionary kasi raw nakafocus sila more on ideas kaysa sa material reality. They were even accused of blowing theoretical bubbles, which means gumagawa lang daw sila ng theory na maganda sa pandinig pero hindi connected sa may reality. So para siyang abstract lang. So, ano nga ba ang nabago or what changed? So, ang critical theory raw ay nabago gradually. Nagiging mas philosophical at abstract. Nag-shift ito from action-oriented to idea-centered theory, especially as it later emerged with postmodernism. So, next is now moving on to the contemporary Frankfurt School. So ito ay niled ni Jürgen Habermas. Ang goal niya dito is i-continue yung ideas ni Marx pero ginagawa niyang adaptive. So naka-adapt ito sa may modern society. So may mga questions si Habermas dito such as kung paano ma-maintain ang emancipatory goal ni Marx despite of its limitations. So paano may address ang ideas ni Max Weber without becoming pessimistic. Kung paano ma-avoid ang subjectivism ng mga earlier theories katulad nila Georgy Lukács, Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno. And kung paano ma-combine ang material condition katulad ng economy at politics and ang human relations or intersubjectivity. So ang goal lang naman dito ni Habermas is maging balance, which is hindi maging too optimistic and too pessimistic, and also hindi siya abstract. Next is punta naman tayo sa may concept ni Habermas na public sphere. So, in structural transformation of public sphere, ang public sphere ay realm ng social life where people ay free mag-discuss ng public issues using rational argument nang hindi nagre-rely sa may tradition, dogma, or force. So, ito ay may development and decline. So, ang development ng public sphere ay kasama yung rise ng market economy and tumutulong ito to weaken feudalism, which it gave an opportunity for opportunity for ordinary people na mas bumoses. However, na-decline ito as the state and bureaucracy became stronger, turning public issues into technical matters kaysa sa open discussions. Hence, the main issue is the decline of freedom, and the challenge is how the public sphere can be regained.
The critic of science, especially in critical theory, argues that science is not always neutral or purely objective. Instead, it can function as an ideology that supports those in power, particularly political and economic elites. This means that science is used to justify their actions and make their decision appear correct and necessary. According to Habermas, this leads to what is called a legitimation crisis, where people begin to question and lose trust in institutions. However, science self-maintains this legitimacy by presenting societal issues as simple technical problems that experts or social engineers can solve. In reality, these problems are often deeper social issues such as inequality or power imbalance which are ignored. Additionally, the dominance of science pushes aside other important forms of knowledge, such as critical knowledge, which examines social contradiction, and historical or hermeneutic knowledge, which help people find meaning in life. Because of this, the critic of science aims to promote critical understanding, helping people better understand each other and society in a meaningful and reflective way. This topic discusses the idea of legitimation crisis introduced by the sociologist Habermas. He explains how modern societies, especially capitalist ones, face problems not just economically but also in terms of meaning and public trust. First, Habermas observed that there is a decline of the public sphere, meaning people are less involved in open discussion about political and social issues. Instead of being debated publicly, many issues are now treated as technical problems that only experts and government officials can solve. This leads to what he calls technocratic consciousness, where decisions are controlled by specialists rather than the general public. Because of this, society begins to prioritize instrumental reason, which focuses on efficiency or achieving goals quickly. While this is useful, it ignores deeper human needs like understanding, communication, and shared meaning. Habermas also explains that society is divided into three subsystems: the economic system, which deals with production and resources; the politico-administrative system, which handles governance and decisions; the cultural system, life work, which includes values, beliefs, and social interactions. When this system fails, different types of crises happen. Economic crisis, when the economy cannot meet people's needs. Rationality crisis, when the government fails to make effective decisions. Motivation crisis, when people lose meaning or willingness to participate in society. Legitimation crisis, when people no longer trust or support the government. Habermas argues that today the most serious problems are not economic but motivation and legitimation crisis. People begin to feel disconnected, lose trust in institutions, and question authority.
Ngayon naman, I will be discussing the early analysis of speech and interaction, particularly focusing sa ideas ni Habermas. By the early 1970s, nakita ni Habermas na ang mission ng critical theory ay dapat mag-emphasize sa process ng interaction na mediated by speech. Ibig sabihin, para sa kanya, ang social understanding at social change ay deeply connected sa kung paano talaga nakikipag-communicate ang mga tao sa isa't isa. Pero in-explain din niya na ang speech acts ay hindi lang simple o isolated events. Itong mga speech acts na ito ay nagre-rely sa ating stores of knowledge, yung mga rules, norms, values, tacit understandings, at memory traces. In short, whenever we speak or interact, gumagamit tayo ng shared knowledge at background understanding para magkaroon ng sense ang ating communication. Ngayon, itong ideas niya sa speech process ay parang restatement of the romanticized public sphere. Ito yung ideal space kung saan ang mga issue ay openly debated at rationally resolved. Ang ginawa ni Habermas, nirestate niya itong view na ito ng what is good and desirable sa mas theoretical at conceptual terms. Kaya naman, ang goal ng critical theory ay dapat expose yung mga conditions na nagdi-distort sa communication at humaharang sa pag-achieve ng ideal speech situation. Ang Utopian ni Habermas ay isang society kung saan ang mga actor ay pwedeng mag-communicate without distortion, maintindihan ng subjective states ng isa't isa at ma-resolve ang differences through argumentation na walang halong external constraint o coercion. Basically, gusto niyang restore ang public sphere sa ating day-to-day interactions. Moving forward, gumamit si Habermas ng metaphor mula sa psychoanalytic theory para subukang i-uncover yung mga distortions na ito. Pero mas naging focus niya kinalaunan ang process of communicative action and interaction para mabawasan ang domination sa society. By the mid-1970s, tinawag niya itong analysis na universal pragmatics at ang centerpiece nito ay ang theory of communicative action. Sabi niya, ang communication ay hindi lang basta words o grammar, involved din dito ang tinatawag niyang validity claims. May tatlong basic types ng claims na importante sa communicative action. Una, effectiveness. Yung mga nag-assert ng isang action ay ang most effective at efficient means para makuha ang isang goal. Yung focus niya, does it work? Pangalawa, normative appropriateness. Yung claim na ang isang action ay correct at proper based sa relevant norms. Focus naman niya, is it right or appropriate? And yung last ay sincerity. Yung pagpapanatili ng subjective experiences na sinasabi natin ay sincere at authentic. Focus naman ito ay, is it truthful or genuine? Lahat ng speech acts ay implicitly gumagawa ng tatlong claims na ito. Kapag may nag-challenge sa mga claims na ito, doon na nagkakaroon ng debate at criticism gamit ng ating shared stocks of knowledge. Importante ito dahil ito ang nagre-reflect sa version niya ng public sphere. Pero, warning ni Habermas, madalas itong naagaw kapag ang claims ay dinadaan sa power and authority imbes na discussion. Pero kung ang claims ay nagsettle sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigay ng reasons sa isang mutual give and take, doon pumapasok ang rational discourse. Sa huli, in-emphasize ni Habermas na built-in na sa interaction natin ang potential para sa rational discourse. At itong discourse na ito ang susi para makabuo ng isang society na mas just, open at free. Ang next ko namang i-discuss ay ang reconceptualization of social evolution ni Habermas. To begin, katulad ni Karl Marx, dinesign din ni Habermas ang kanyang views tungkol sa communicative action sa loob ng isang evolutionary framework ng society. Pero sa case ni Habermas, ang evolution niya ay mas reminiscent ng mga functional stage models. Ibig sabihin, kahit influence siya ni Marx, hindi niya ito sinusunod ng strictly. Sa halip, pinagsasama-sama niya ito sa ibang pang sociological perspectives. Para kay Habermas, ang evolution ay isang process ng structural differentiation at ang pag-usbong ng mga integrative problem. Itong ideas na ito ay rooted sa arguments ng mga major sociologists gaya ni Comte, Spencer, Durkheim at Parsons, na lahat nag-aral kung paano nagde-develop ang mga society over time. Humingi rin siya ng idea kina Herbert Spencer at Niklas Luhmann nang i-argue niya na ang integration ng complex systems ay naglilid sa tinatawag na adaptive upgrading, meaning, habang nagiging mas complex ang isang society, mas nagiging magaling din itong mag-adapt sa environment nito. In simple terms, kung mas developed ang society, mas kaya nitong i-handle ang challenges. Halimbawa, ang isang society na umaasa lang sa religious mythology ay mas less complex at mas mahihirapang mag-respond sa challenges kumpara sa isang society na may malalaking stores of technology at mga normative procedure. Pinapakita nito na ang development ay hindi lang basta growth, kundi pagtaas ng capacity at complexity. Ngayon, ayon kay Habermas, ang basis ng societal integration ay nasa processes of communication. Ito ang nag-aalaw sa atin na mag-develop ng mutual understandings at shared stores of knowledge. So, ang communication ay hindi lang basta usapan, ito ang foundation ng social unity natin. Pero, may problema tayo rito. Kapag itong mga interactive process na ito ay na-stop o na-arrest ng mga pattern ng economic at political organization, ang learning capacity ng society ay bumababa. Ibig sabihin, kapag ang system gaya ng ekonomiya o ng gobyerno ay nakikialam sa genuine communication, nagiging less capable ang society na matuto at mag-progress. Isa sa mga main integrative problems ng capitalist societies ay ang integration ng dalawang key components. Una, nandyan ang material forces of production o ang economy na hawak ng state. Pangalawa, ang cultural stores of knowledge na galing sa communicative interaction. Kapag hindi maayos ang koneksyon ng dalawang ito, doon na nag-uumpisa ang problema. In fact, ang mga society na nagde-develop lang sa material o economic side pero walang integration on a normative and cultural level o walang shared understanding ay mananatiling unintegrated at makakaranas ng mga crisis. Ito ang dahilan kung bakit ang highly developed societies ay nakakaranas pa rin ng instability at conflict. Tandaan natin na ang human species ay mananatili o mapapanatili ang sarili through socially coordinated activities at ang coordination na ito ay nabubuo through communication. Specifically, communication na ang goal ay ang reaching agreement.
So let us now move on to the changing balance between system and life world process. System and life world. Society evolved and political and economic systems began to dominate system and life world process. Ibig sabihin, habang nagiging mas complex ang society, mas lumalakas ang influence ng political at economic systems dahil dito, naapektuhan na nila yung cultural life at everyday interaction ng mga tao. So next is colonialization of life world. Habermas says, system based on money and power invade every cultural interaction, replacing shared meaning of mean ends rationality. Sabi ni Habermas, yung mga system na nakabase sa power at money ay unti-unting pumapasok sa life world. Ibig sabihin, yung dating relationship at social interaction na may shared meaning ay napapalitan ng practical at goal-oriented thinking. Next naman sa social crisis, legitimation and motivation crisis where people lost trust, commitment, and meaning in society. Dito naman, kapag masyadong nangingibabaw yung sistema, nawawalan ng sense of meaning ang mga tao sa society. Nagkakaroon ng legitimation crisis dahil nababawasan ang trust at commitment ng mga tao sa social institution. Last is yung purpose of critical theory. Restores communicative rationality and balance between system and life world. So, yung purpose ng critical theory is ibalik ang communicative rationality kung saan ang public discussion such as debate and understanding ang nagiging basihan ng decision para maibalik ang balance ng system at life world. So, dito naman tayo sa the postmodern turn in critical theorizing. Critique of social science. Postmodern critical theory challenges claims of objectivity in social science, saying that scientific explanations are just grand narratives shaped by interest. Sinasabi ng postmodernist na ang social science, kahit nag-claim na neutral or objective ay hindi talaga ganon. Ang mga scientific explanation daw ay parang grand narratives lang, isang way ng pagkwento sa society na pabor sa interes ng gumawa nito. Next naman is science and politics. Specific research serves the interests of those who fund it, and it reflects the interests of funders and dominant social groups, and knowledge is influenced by changing societal condition. Science ay hindi hiwalay sa politika at power. Ang research ay kadalasan na influence ng funders at dominant social groups. Kaya ang knowledge na lumalabas ay nagre-reflect sa priorities ng may kapangyarihan. Kahit ang mga laws or principles na sinasabing scientific ay maaaring magbago depende sa societal shifts at conflict ng interest. Next naman is postmodern self-critique. Postmodernists themselves create grand narratives and pursue interest, making them subject to the same critics they level at science. Ang postmodernist theories mismo, kahit tinutuligsa nila ang science, ay gumagawa rin sila ng grand narratives at may sariling interest, tulad ng academic advancement. Ibig sabihin, vulnerable din sila sa parehong criticism na binabato nila sa science. So, mayroong substantive view na divided into two, which is the economic postmodernist and cultural postmodernist. Sa economic postmodernist, mas malapit sa classical theories kagaya ni Karl Marx. Tapos, focus ito sa socio-economic structures lang. Sa cultural postmodernist naman, mas pinapansin ang growing role ng culture at values sa society at minsan mas dominant kaysa sa economic conditions.
And now, I will be discussing economic postmodernism. Economic postmodernism focuses on the changes in capitalism in modern society. Today, the economy has become global, technology-driven, and heavily influenced by the media. Production is now less visible, while consumption becomes more central. People are influenced by advertising, brands, and the media, which shape what they buy and how they think. In the Philippine context, we can see this through online shopping platforms like Lazada, Shopee, or even TikTok, where people often buy products because of the sales, review, or influencers' recommendations. In terms of key features, global capitalism now dominates, and media plays a big role in shaping reality. Consumption becomes more important than production, and identity becomes unstable as trends constantly change. Society is fast-changing, digital, and image-driven. For example, many Filipinos follow trends on TikTok or Facebook, where lifestyle and preferences quickly changes depending on what is popular on time. One of the key thinkers is Frederick Jameson. He divided capitalism into three stages. One is the market, monopoly, and the multinational or global capitalism. He explained that culture is shaped by capitalism. Media and image dominate reality. People also lose connection to how products are made. He introduced the idea of deathlessness, where things lack deeper meaning and society focuses more on appearance and trends. For example, in the Philippines, people may follow fashion, trends, or aesthetics just because they are popular, not because of their deeper culture meaning. Another thinker is David Harvey. He introduced the concept of time-space compression, where technology makes the world feel smaller and faster. Examples includes online shopping, instant communications, and global businesses. In the Philippines, we experience this through fast deliveries, online communication, and access to international products. However, this also leads to a faster lifestyle, less stability, and constant changes in trends. And lastly, Scott Lush and John Urey focus on consumption and the identity. They explain that people build their identity through brands, fashion, and media. Instead of having a strong community identity, people now identify with trends, online culture, and lifestyle choices. In the Philippines, this can be seen in how individual expresses themselves through social media, fashion styles, or the product they are using. As a result, society becomes fragmented and individualized as people divided by trends and lifestyle while defining themselves through personal choices and consumption rather than shared values.
So now, I will discuss cultural postmodernism sa perspective nila John Baudrillard, Kenneth Gargan, Thomas Lachman, and Zygmunt Bauman. This topic explains how culture, media, and social interaction influence our interpretation or understanding in reality and even our identity in today's society. So, first is John Baudrillard. According to him, today's society we're no longer experiencing direct reality or original reality. Mas na-expose na tayo sa images, signs, and representation through media. So, medias like TVs, pero hindi naman tayo nakakita masyado ng TVs ngayon or ako lang yon. Pero ngayon, mas exposed na tayo sa social media and internet. He introduced the concept of simulation and simulacra. This is copies or images na wala na or malayo na sa original reality. Ibig sabihin, ano na lang siya, representation ng reality through media na eventually, yung reality na yon, siya na yung magsisilbing, yung representation na yon, siya na yung magsisilbing reality natin. So, sa reading, sabi, meron daw mga signs or stages yung reality hanggang sa umabot na tayo na hindi na siya connected sa original reality. So, for example, yung advertisement. Sa advertisement, di ba, hindi naman talaga pinapakita kung ano yung totoong experience sa isang product. So, mas nag-focus sila sa images, lifestyle, or feeling na gusto nila ipakita sa atin. Hanggang sa, bibilin natin yung product kasi nga, akala natin, yun yung reality. Yun yung makakapagpakita sa atin na maganda yung product. So, over time, yun na yung paniniwalaan natin. Sabi pa niya, sabi pa ni John Baudrillard, dahil dito sa mga to, nagkakaroon tayo ng hyper-reality. Ito yung nahihirapan na yung tao na mag-identify ng totoo sa hindi. Maganda example dito is yung sa AI. Di ba karamihan ng elders, like yung mga tao na hindi na masyadong techie or hindi na exposed sa technology, nahihirapan sila mag-identify kung ano yung AI sa hindi. Makikipag-away pa sila kasi nga nakita daw nila yung asong gumagalaw. So yun yung point yun yung point ni John Baudrillard. So next naman ay kay Kenneth Gargan. So ang focus naman niya ay self-identity. Sabi niya, dahil sa dami ng influence daw natin from media, technologies, and social interaction, nagiging saturated yung self natin. So, meaning nito, sa dami ng opinions, cultures, and expectation and experience na nararanasan natin, hindi na tayo nagkakaroon ng isang identity. So, nade-develop ng tao yung multiple identities. For example, iba yung personality mo sa bahay, iba yung personality mo sa mga kaibigan mo, sa katrabaho mo, sa magulang mo, or even sa random na tao. So, naglilid ito sa fragment self, meaning ito na yung ikaw na mismo, nahihirapan ka na kasi nga sa dami na identity mo. Hindi mo na rin kilala kung sino ka. Like, hindi mo na unstable na yung pag-identify mo sa sarili mo. Dahil sa pabago-bago nga, depending sa situation or interaction mo sa ibang tao. So, sabi niya, in postmodern society, identity is no longer fixed, but something that is continuously shaped by other factors in our society. So, next, kay Thomas Lackman. Ang focus naman niya ay paano nabubuo yung reality. According to him, ay socially constructed, pati yung reality natin. Ibig sabihin, yung reality natin as a person or ikaw mismo ay hindi nature. Hindi siya nature or hindi siya binigay sa atin. Hindi siya natural sa atin. So, nurture siya through interaction with other people. In everyday life, doon nade-develop or nabubuo yung mga bagay through communication. Like, mga bagay sa buhay mo through communication. So, for example, dito is yung beliefs, norms, and even kung ano yung tama at mali, nakadepende siya sa ibang tao. Like, kung lumaki ka sa isang lugar na yung mali ay tama para sa kanila, yun yung magiging reality mo. And kung kabaligtaran naman, kung lumaki ka sa isang lugar na yung mga mali ay mga tama, ayun yung mali sa kanila, yun din yung magiging reality mo. So basically, kung ano yung tingin mo sa reality ay actually influence siya ng many factors or influence siya habang lumalaki ka or nabubuhay ka sa mundo. So next naman ay kay Zygmunt Bauman. So sabi niya, ang society natin ngayon ay fluid. Like hindi siya solid na merong firm identity, pabago-bago siya, hindi na siya stable tulad ng dati. Dati kasi 'di ba meron tayong mga fixed na bagay like trabaho, relationship, or hindi tayo, like yung society natin, merong fixed na trabaho, merong fixed na relationship, and identity. Pero ngayon, everything is temporary, pwede ka magbago. For example, sa changes ng job, 'di ba sa job dati kung ano lang yung pwede sa'yo, like kung laborer ka lang, doon ka lang, hindi ka pwedeng umangat doon. So sa relationship naman, merong mga uso pa dati mga fixed marriage, like ibibenta ka ng magulang mo or bibilin ka ng mas mayaman, ganon. So ngayon mas flexible na ang lahat. Pero dahil dito nagkakaroon ng uncertainty sa society natin. Dahil sa pagbabago-bago nagkakaroon ng sense of stability and security. So sabi ni Bauman, modern life is more unpredictable and people need to constantly adjust and change. So overall, cultural postmodernism shows that reality identity today is not fixed. So nabubago-bago siya and they are shaped by media, interaction, and constantly change. Kaya minsan nagiging confusing kung ano talaga tayo or sa sarili mismo natin, hindi natin alam kung ano ba talaga yung reality or ano ba talaga tayo as a tao. Yun lang po. Thank you po.
Perhaps to cap off our report, I think the best question that we can answer, despite all the lenses that our sociological theories have taught us, is simply, why do critical theories persist? Critical theories persist because the conditions it was designed to analyze, which in this case are power, domination, and inequality, have not yet disappeared. We experience it on a daily basis in everyday news and in everyday realities of ordinary Filipinos, for example. That's why a paradigm shift wasn't really necessary, even though it entertained some crucial debates like that of Marx versus Max Weber. Early thinkers from the Frankfurt School recognized that capitalism did not collapse as Marx predicted, but it instead adapted, embedding control not only in the economy but also in the culture, media, and other institutions in ways that echo Max Weber's concerns about rationalization and bureaucracy, putting us in iron cages and setting a rational legal domination that we take for granted. Because modern systems continue to shape how we think, how we act, and how we live, often subtly without really thinking that it is coercive, critical theory remains relevant as a tool for uncovering these hidden forms of domination. It perhaps persists simply because the project of emancipation is unfinished, and it is something that we need to carry on as a manifestation of a combination of praxis and theory. I hope that you learned something from Group 9 that reported or elucidated why critical theories still persist, especially in diagnosing modernity or even postmodernity. Again, we're Group 9. I'm Josem Lumul Uwe, and we have never been prouder to report. Thank you.